from our first proper review this week, Sleep's The Sciences. Just to remind you, when Pitchfork reviews things, they review them on a 0 to 10 scale. Somewhere on 8.2 or 8.3, they give it a BNM, which stands for Best New Music. It's an album they basically are saying everybody should be talking about, and that's what we're going to do. So, Dan, take it away.
Yeah, up first, we've got Sleep with the Sciences, which was released by Third Man, and on April 26th, got an 8.4 BNM in a review by Grayson Haver-Curran. Some background, Sleep is a trailblazing stoner rock doom metal band who released a few well-received records in the early 90s before their famously troubled third LP, Dope Smoker, turned them into legends. Consisting of a single hour-long track, Dope Smoker was first rejected and then mangled by Sleep's label, initiating a long legal deadlock that eventually resulted in the band's dissolution. By the time of its first unedited release in 2003, though, bootlegs of the album had inspired an enthusiastic cult following. Starting in 2009, Sleep seemed to settle into a reunion tour circuit, releasing another Dope Smoker reissue and one unremarkable new track. But on 4/20 this year, the band surprised everyone by dropping The Sciences, their first LP in nearly 2 decades. Even more surprising, everyone seems to love it. It's currently the 8th highest rated album of the year on RateYourMusic.com, and Pitchfork's glowing review claims that the album, quote, makes everything that was originally great about Sleep even better. Previous familiarity with Sleep?
Well, I don't really know them that well, and I feel like I'll be relying on you a little bit because I know you're a much bigger fan than I am. But I've, of course, listened to Dope Smoker. That's it, though, and not a lot. It's like I find this kind of doom metal stuff the most tolerable of all the metals, but I still don't listen to it that much. So, I want to know what you are thinking as like a bigger fan when this was, first announced. But for me, I was like, I had no interest whatsoever. I thought this was going to be like, some washed up band that I don't even like that much. Why would I ever check it out? But where were you at?
Yeah, I mean, when it got announced, I was excited. I am a fan of Sleep. But I was cautiously excited, I kind of thought like, do we really need an album 20 years later? And they sort of were in that, reunion tour circuit. Like, I saw them a couple years ago here, which was great. And they apparently played some of the songs like from this record, but being honest, live, it's just really loud and everything kind of sounds the same. So I didn't notice, but so I was cautiously optimistic, but bands like this, they kind of can be like one note.
Yeah.
And so I was worried that it was just going to be Dope Smoker Part 2 and, didn't really need that. But I guess let's go ahead and describe the sound.
Yeah, well, I am really interested to hear what you have to say about how different it is from Dope Smoker. But I mean, for me, it's got this very, what I know about doom metal sludge kind of sound. I mean, you've talked before, I think, on the show about how doom metal seems to be kind of about like bands that really like Black Sabbath. Like that's the starting point. And that's the kind of riffage that we're getting here. Like this slowed down kind of like super heavy, juggernaut sounding kind of Sabbath-esque riffing. But a lot of attention to the sludge, like in a sun or earth kind of way, which I think I'll talk more about in a minute. But, just extra attention to like, these long songs, these like 15-minute, like mostly instrumental juggernauts that have, just huge walls of like the sludgiest, most distorted guitars kind of layered on top of each other, playing with each other in interesting ways. But just the attention to that, like the textures of that sludge is kind of what I would say. But what would you add? And do you feel like it's something new for them?
Well, first, I think you're spot on with the Black Sabbath worship. That is the starting point for all of this kind of stuff. I guess when I said I didn't want it to just be Dope Smoker Part 2. I didn't mean that it kind of isn't. It just is a little better than that. Like, these kind of things, you get. I'm trying to think of like the best way to say it. Like I knew what I would get here, and I got it, but right. It wasn't disappointing. That doesn't really make I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense, but it is that sludge it's just so great, like how heavy it is. It's that right. Boris has that record called Amplifier Worship,
right.
and that is like, I think that describes like this genre to a T. Like it is the worship of equipment.
Yes,
you're hearing amps and pedals and stuff, and I dig that kind of stuff. I got a little bit of equipment worship in me, and that's what you get with these kind of records, and it's fun. It's not the most progressive or revolutionary subgenre at times, but you know what you're coming into, and it's good if that's what you want.
Well, I was going to say, like, to me, one of the coolest things about this record, and this genre, when I think about Earth or Sun or Boris, my limited understanding of this genre is that it is that kind of amplifier worship, and interesting things happen. If you play music, this, but when you have like a couple amps just cranked and you have like a huge distorted sound, all right, you hit like a chord and you just let it ring out, and the way that the notes of the chord sort of play against each other, like harmonically, it creates like these weird pulses and like strange movements as the chord just rings out. It's never, you can't duplicate it. It's just something that happens sort of like magically. And I think that's why people fall in love with the unique sound of amps and, certain distortion pedals and stuff like that. And, that's sort of the name of the game here, is like these huge chords and not just the chord, but like other layered guitar sounds, within that wall of sound that are just sort of like harmonically, so rich because they're just feeding off of each other and pulsing in weird ways. And a lot of times there's like a nice, because it's almost like metal slowed down. There's a nice attention to like, I really appreciate how like the drummer and the bassist were really, attuned to this, where, there's like just this great sludge, like wall of sludge that kind of like happens, and then they'll kind of leave a little space just to hear how those textures are kind of like warbling and wobbling together for a moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, the drums, I think, are like really great on this. They just sound like so huge, and everything sounds like, it's the downbeat only. He'll throw in, maybe like a little triplet fill or something here and there. But yeah, there's like, they leave the space to let the amps do their work. And
right.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a guilty pleasure, I think, because it is like sort of like, you almost know exactly what this record sounds like already, but it's great.
Yeah, and as a side note, I was just thinking about that kind of like pulsing and weird like warbling that happens. That's the kind of stuff that Lamont Young, was trying to eliminate with his like perfect intonation, his just intonation thing. So just kind of I thought an interesting throwback to an earlier episode. But yeah, I think that all that is right up my alley. The vocals, which I think luckily there are not a ton of, and we should talk about the lyrics too, which are fucking stupid.
Yes.
How would we describe that? I mean, again, it's like a lot of instrumental passages, but do the vocals bother you?
I've always thought with Sleep and especially Electric Wizard, like these bands would be like probably some of my favorite bands if they would just get rid of the vocals. 'Cause yeah, I thought the vocals were more tolerable on this record than they are on Dope Smoker. Just the guy's voice is kind of, I don't know, it's nothing like special. It just seems to detract, if anything. And then, yeah, getting into the lyrics territory, it's like D&D meets a lot of weed. It's a lot. I mean, they have an album called Dope Smoker. You're not surprised here, but yeah, it's a lot of stuff about weed. I'm not like a weed guy, so I don't really even know about it.
Yeah, they're obsessed with weed, and I don't know.
But Sleep is like, I always kind of feel like there's like a little bit of satire in it. Like
that's what I don't know. I was trying to decide.
I think there is. Like
there has to be.
Right? Like if you look at like the some of their like promo pictures from like recent tours, they're all like dressed in like funny suits, like not looking like you'd expect. Like they clearly have like some humor about them. And
Yes.
I think they like, when they write a song called Marijuana Knots theme, I think they, they're in on
because,
the
like,
joke,
That whole song, is about kind of like a spaceship called the marijuana knot or whatever. And it's like approaching planet Eomia, which is like constant Black Sabbath references throughout this whole record.
The fifth song, Giza Butler, is a member
bassist,
of
So it's like the lyrics are just nothing, it's just like silly weed stuff, like silly Black Sabbath references. They play it really straight faced, but like you said, like there has to be something kind of tongue in cheek.
Yeah, there's got.
I don't doubt though that they love weed. Like,
no, there's nothing. They're not joking about that.
Don't get me wrong, they do love weed, but
I love one of my favorite parts of the record is like the Sciences. The opening track is like it just sounds like a guy in his bedroom like digging around on guitar, which I could do without that a little bit. But then he stops digging around. Giant bong hit.
No, I love it because it's like feedback, like just sort of building and building for like 3 minutes, and it actually starts to crescendo. Like you're like, all right, we're launching into this first track, but it stops completely for a massive bong rip before it then explodes.
But it honestly works like really well.
It does, and some of their lyrics are kind of like talking about weed like it's some kind of religious experience. And I got to say that sometimes the vocals have kind of and I can't stress enough like how there are just barely any vocals, thank God. But when they're there, sometimes they have kind of like a chanty, like a Gregorian chant, kind of like deep, like, oh, kind of thing to them. Mm-hmm. And it kind of plays with this, like sometimes like a lot of the music has like sort of a Middle Eastern kind of vibe, the way that like Godspeed would kind of use the same thing. And it adds like this weird, like kind of spooky religious quality to it. And yet if you listen to the words, it's about like how much they love weed. So something weird there, but you're right. It really doesn't take away from it musically, because that's the meat here. And I got to say, I was pretty impressed with, I think something like this could turn into a mess. If you're just obsessed with the sound that like amplifiers make when they're, really loud with like loud distorted guitars, just kind of like these chords like ringing out and stuff. It could become like just really noodly and aimless, Yeah. But these tracks are very tightly written. It sounds kind of like, a kind of thing that was worked on over many years, which, I don't know how continuously they were thinking about these tracks over the last 20 years, but they certainly spent some time on them because they feel tight,
Yeah, it is like, this kind of thing could get noodly like super quick. And I think some of the other kind of doom metal and especially, regular metal type things like do get into that noodly territory. But yeah, this seems like very worked on. And it had to have been because, like I said, I saw them in concert. I'm trying to remember. It was like they came for a benefit for like the Pulse shooting in Orlando. Oh. So it was like just a couple months after Pulse. So what was that, like 2 years ago? And they played. I'm pretty sure it was Sonic Titan and maybe even one other one. So I mean, the song had to have at least existed in some form, a couple years ago. So
yeah, and I think that I would like to look it up real quick. Maybe it's not worth it, but I think Sonic Titan was included as like a bonus track on maybe the most recent Dope Smoker reissue or something like that. So yeah, they've certainly been like around for a little while, but they're tight. There's like kind of this kind of classic metal riffage. And again, I'm not that like, well versed in the metal world, but it gets like kind of stupid, like when it's like about, it's very like math rocky, like how fast can we make these like timing changes and stuff like that, but because this is slowed down, it's not like about that kind of wankery bullshit. And yet like the riffage is kind of like intricate, but logical. Like it feels like it's always sort of moving in a way that makes sense and prevents it from being just, sun or earth, like just huge droned out things. Mm-hmm. It's like the songs just feel very tight. Which I really liked. I guess I should mention, though, that Giza Butler song you talked about a little bit, maybe a little bit in there, got a little bit, aimless at points, like just barely.
Yeah, there's like a big guitar solo. Is it in that one? There's like one time there's like a real ripping solo. I'm pretty sure it's in that track, and I could do without that.
Yeah, what do you think about that kind of like, it was my opinion that the sometimes there's like these blistering solos, and there'll be like on both, channels left and right, like some sort of harmonizing. But to me, it kind of is like, it's not really like shredding as much as it's just like blasts of noise,
Yeah, I mean, it's less annoying than like, some sort of dad rock AC/DC solo.
Right.
But, it is like it's one of the things that stops this from being something like, that's my favorite band, kind of thing. Like, and I think that is why I over Sleep and things, I prefer Sun and Earth and Boris's more droney stuff. And I think it's because it mostly does away with the kind of ripping solo type thing and the lyrics. But yeah, I mean, it's not too bad. Like this is definitely like, I almost hate that it's a form of metal, because basically I think all metal besides slow, like stoner doom metal is just like annoying. Some black metal is okay, but like it's just mostly annoying, fast. I think it works so much better.
Virtuosity.
Like, it works so much better, like just slow like this, I think.
I think so too. Yeah. Yeah. Again, it was not something I was looking forward to, but I was, I really enjoyed it, over the last couple of weeks that I was listening to it. We've talked about a lot of positives, possible negatives. What I really want to know is, it got a B&M and it's getting rave reviews. Of course, like Rate Your Music is like really predisposed toward metal, so it's like maybe inflated a little bit, but do you B&M something like this? I mean, doesn't it sound like it's just kind of like the record they would have made right after Dope Smoker if they hadn't broken up or something?
Yeah, but I think that maybe is like a positive. I think a lot of times when a band like does break up for so long, they're rusty, and they don't seem rusty here. It doesn't seem like 20 years or 19 years, whatever it is, like went by.
Right.
So I think that there's something like positive to be said about that. But I think it sort of does deserve the B&M, because I think if somebody has not ever listened to Sleep, or like maybe even a lot of doom metal in particular, like, this might be a better entry point than Dope Smoker, since Dope Smoker is probably, just like a one. I mean, it's a 1 hour thing, but it's kind of like separate songs, within the thing. But that's still, when you look at that can be a little frightening,
daunting.
Yeah. Here, this is like a normal sort of album. I think this might be like a really good entry point, just to like doom metal in general, and especially Sleep. So I think for that, I think it does deserve a B&M.
Yeah, it was basically my entry point, and I guess even though I have like a little familiarity with stuff like this, but I felt the same way. Like, it's a great way to get into this. I also kind of felt like they are a band that is probably highly responsible for this style, for this sound, this genre. Hugely influential, I have to believe. And, it's a shame that they stopped, if this had come out right after Dope Smoker, it would probably be acclaimed as like a band on the top of their game has put out another great record, even if they haven't like reinvented the wheel. It's a sound that they helped create, and they're one of the best at it. And, in that respect, I guess I do kind of like the B&M, because even though it doesn't really speak that much to like what's going on now, it's like everybody probably wishes that there was another Sleep record that came out, in the early 2000s, and it's finally here after considerable delay, right? It probably would have gotten a B&M in 2001 if it had come out then,
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so how about that score? And I should mention that I was pretty surprised that Pitchfork, of all places, actually did give this such a glowing review. But an 8.4 B&M, not the highest B&M ever, but pretty good for Pitchfork. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a good score. This isn't like a 10-10 like we mentioned. There's some, you can find some negatives about it. But I think it's a perfectly great record. I'll continue to listen to it. I've been listening to it since it came out, basically. It'll probably make my year-end list. I think an 8.4 is good. Maybe I'll bump it a little, an 8.420. How about that?
Oh, I was thinking of like quibbling a little bit and going maybe like the lowest BNM I could, 8.2 BNM, I guess. It's, much more enjoyable than what I thought it would be. Not really my scene, though, and yet for the reasons I just explained, I think it probably should be heard.
To hear the rest of our discussion, check out our website, metaforkmusic.com, or search us out on iTunes, Metafork Music.